Okay, great. Thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you all being here. We're ready to move on with our discussion of the book of Kohelet. Again, as always, in case you missed any of the previous classes, please feel free to find them on YouTube or on our website. And I'm just going to pull that up here in just a second. So that you could all get the website, so it's available. Sorry, I should have had that ready beforehand. There we go. But it's the same page that you may have logged on here from. So let me just put that in the chat. I'm sorry, I should have had that beforehand. So again, here in the chat, I just put our website with the page for our class. In case you missed any of the previous classes, feel free to catch up there, or if you'd like to review. As we got into last week we began the discussion of Simcha, of happiness. Okay, and so far we've discussed the idea that King Solomon is going to, before anything else, the first half of the book, so to speak, he's going to be addressing our relationship with this world, with Olam Hazeh, with the world that we live in, as opposed to any higher realms, and how we engage with all the different aspects of this world. And the first thing that he focuses on is, again, this idea of Simcha, of happiness. Okay, and in it, we saw in the past couple of weeks that his initial reaction to it was that happiness is all a bunch of hooey, and doesn't have any clear purpose. But he's, as we're going to see, and as we already have seen with the book of Kohelet, is that King Solomon doesn't just go with his initial gut reaction. He's very clearly focused on doing proper research, doing proper inspection into a matter before before having a deciding or before declaring a decision on it. So while he always tells us what his first reaction is, what his gut reaction is, what we've been calling his eyes, what his eyes see, he also then takes it always to his heart and allows his heart to go, and the heart being the seat of intellect, where he does proper research, where he goes and he engages all the different sides. We've seen already where he reaches out to otherwise people. Again, that's part of his qualifications, that he is the wisest of all people, and in the city of wise people, surrounded by it, he has all the means to do so. And so now he's going to go and inspect and research Simcha, research happiness properly, in order so that he could give a proper decision about what happiness is. Is it good for us? Is it bad for us? Are there aspects of both? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So we saw he introduced it last week, and he explained how he's going to really get into it. He's going to experience everything that people consider happiness, and he's going to use that to pass judgment. He's not just going to sit there, in an ivory tower and tell us what happiness is and whether it's good or bad. He's going to get in deep with it and try and figure out what's going to be the nature of Simcha, of happiness. What I perceive for this week's verses, or for what I see for this week's verses, is it's kind of, I don't know if anyone here has recently looked at a research paper, a graduate level research paper, or a scientific study. But often what you'll have a hypothesis, followed by or a research review, literature review, where it goes through what they've said in the past, a hypothesis about what's going to be the outcome, followed by a methodology of what the method is that they're going to go through, the researcher is going to go through, and then the findings from the method. So this week's verses are going to be the method. We're going to see how King Solomon goes ahead and what did he do? How did he involve himself in happiness? When he says, I'm researching happiness, what process did he go through? When he said last week, we said that he's dousing himself in happiness, as like somebody pouring pouring wine all over their body, right? He's dousing himself in happiness. So immersing himself in it. What is that supposed to mean? What is that going to look like? So that's this week's verses we're going to see. And that's actually a number of verses. And so that's where we're going to go. I'm going to jump into the share screen right now, so we could all see what's going on. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. Share screen should be coming up right now. There we go. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm glad to see you could see it. And I have the text up to the largest font size I could get it to. So hopefully that's visible to everyone. And we are starting here from verse number 4. Okay, I'm just highlighting it so everyone could get a chance to see it. And we're going to go through this verse word for word, and then kind of see it all together as we usually do. So he's going to say like this, Higdalti ma'asoi. All right, literally that means I have made great my actions, or I have increased my actions. All right, meaning to say that he went ahead and he's explaining now what actions he took to go and research happiness. So I have gone and I've done a lot of work to get there. All right, the first two things that he lists over here is baniti li batim. I have built for myself houses. Notati li kramim, and I have planted for myself vineyards. Okay, again, higdalti ma'asoi. I have increased my actions. Baniti li batim. I have built for myself houses. Notati li kramim, and I have planted for myself vineyards.
Rabbi, I have a question. Can you delve into the word natati a little bit?
Yes, natati. So when you have a word that has this ending of the letter taf and the letter yud, that means I did this past tense. So that's the suffix. And then the shoresh, the root of that word is nata. That means literally to plant or to, it's the action of actually placing something in its home for forever, and it's forever home, so to speak, like, and it's often used in regards to planting. So, for example, we use the same word when we say that Abraham pitched his tent. Actually, that's the same word, yita eshel. He pitched his, or he planted a vineyard, not a vineyard there, I'm sorry. He planted an orchard, and that was where he welcomed his guests. Similarly, we have in the blessing that we say over the study of Torah, that we say every morning in the prayer service, we also use this term that Hashem planted in us the words of Torah. So that is that word, nata, okay?
Yeah, that was the context that I was looking for. Thank you.
Yes. So again, higdalti ma'asoi, I have increased my actions. Baniti li batim, I have built for myself houses. And natati li kramim, and I have planted for myself vineyards. Now, what we're going to see over here, over the next couple verses, is that he's going to start with things that are necessary and move into things that are less necessary. So he's building one step after the next. You need to have a house, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of people around here who don't have houses and don't have access to shelter. But for a person to live comfortably, to live even in any civilized manner, they need to have a house. So that's, first of all, he says, I built houses. Okay, that's the step, the very bottom level of my the very basic level, I'm sorry, of what I've done for myself. I even moved it a step further, though, and I also planted for myself vineyards. Okay, I built for myself houses, but I also planted for myself vineyards. Now, vineyards are their farms and all sorts of, and our agriculture is a necessary part of human life also. We need to have our food come from somewhere. Vineyards is an interesting choice because that means that vineyards are not, if a person goes and he plants wheat, plants corn, etc., that is going to be something that's going to bring him joy, bring the person joy when they bring in the produce. However, when a person brings in the produce from a vineyard, that's a whole different level of joy, right? The person is able to go, in this case, King Solomon is able to go and take that fruit, take that produce, and turn that into wine. So again, this is very Simcha directed towards the goal of gaining happiness. So of all the fruits that he plants vineyards first. Okay. Again, to read the verse one more time altogether. Higdalti ma'asai, I have increased my actions. Baniti li batim, I built for myself houses, the most basic needs. Natati li kramim, and I even went beyond that and planted vineyards. Okay. To take it a step further, we're gonna actually be going through these verses rather quickly, but I'll make sure to give plenty of time for them to address each one. Not only did he plant vineyards, but asiti li ganot upardesim. I made for myself. This is now verse number 5. I made for myself gardens and orchards. Okay. Asiti li ganot upardesim. I made for myself gardens and orchards. V'natati vahem, and I planted in them eitz kol peri, all sorts of fruit trees. It's a phrase that doesn't translate perfectly into English. The syntax is different than we would have it in English. In English, I mean, if you were to translate it word for word, it would be trees of all fruit, whatever, all sorts of fruit trees. Okay. So again, let me read the verse again. Asiti li ganot upardesim. I made for myself gardens and orchards. V'natati bohem eitz kol peri, and I planted in them all sorts of fruit trees. And here we find that again, King Solomon is taking things to the next step. Whereas you had the basic necessities of a person, you had houses, he took it a step further and said, I'm even going to plant vineyards. Well, vineyards, I understand there's a innate happiness with a vineyard. Okay. But he goes a step further and says, you know what, I'm going to take it. I'm not just going to stop with vineyards. Maybe that's not a good choice of a plant to decide how to determine what's the purpose of happiness. Maybe it's too happy. Maybe it's something that's it's too physical, too tangible. So you know what he does? He goes a step further and he builds, or he plants for himself gardens and orchards, and plants all sorts of fruit trees in them. Okay, he's not satisfied with just going to vineyards, the kind of the easy route towards happiness, but he even extends himself into vineyards, orchards and gardens. So a thought that occurred to me also is that kings and wealthy people throughout history planted gardens because of their artistic value. They are beautiful. They're a sight to see, which is not a tangible thing. Okay. So again, whereas a vineyard is a tangible happiness creator, beauty, art, that's something a little more difficult to access. So he says, you know what? I'm going to try that also. I'm not just going to try basic necessities, houses. I'm not just going to go to the easy route of the happiest fruit you could think of, but I'm going to plant all different types of trees. Okay, I'm going to try to experience the artistic side of planting, of agriculture also. And he even takes a step further in the next verse. Okay, after this next verse, I'll take a break to see if there's any questions. But in this next verse over here, verse 6, or Vav, Asiti li, I made for myself, berechot moyim, canals of water or springs of water. A brecha is really, it's a pond or some sort of running water, really. Lahashkot mehem yar tzomeach etzim, in order to water with those rivers, forests that sprout trees on their own. Okay. Yeah, that's a little difficult. I'll break it up again and we'll see it again word for word. Asiti li brechot mayim, I made for myself rivers of water or brooks of water. Lahashkot mehem, to water with them. Ya'ar tzomeach eitzim, a forest that sprouts wood on its own. Okay, I'll read the verse one more time. Asiti li brechot mayim, I made for myself brooks of water, streams of water. Lashkot mehem, to water with them. Ya'ar tzomeach eitzim, a forest that sprouts wood, again, seemingly on its own. Okay, you can't cause a forest to sprout wood. The forest is something that sprouts wood on its own. And so what he does over here is building off the theme of the last verse, where he went ahead and he went out of his way to go and plant all the different fruit trees. Said, I'm not taking the easy path towards happiness. I'm gonna explore all the different directions it takes for a person to get to happiness. I'm gonna try every fruit. He doesn't just stop there. He also says, I'm gonna upkeep forests. Okay, maybe there's too much of myself in the gardens that I plant. Maybe there's too much of my own, as we said before, he's constantly trying to correct for bias. So maybe there's too much, maybe I'm putting in too much work for my garden. What if I just have a forest? What if I just walk through a forest? I have a forest I could walk through and enjoy the fruits, the trees that grow naturally on their own, all right? He does make sure that he has some peace in it, right? And I think there's a piece of recognition there also, that in order to appreciate a forest properly, he's going to have to contribute to it some way. Okay, so he says, I made sure that there was plenty of water for this forest, but there's a forest there. It grows trees on its own. I don't have any part in that, or I have a minor part in that. Let's say, right? I built the canals, the rivers, the brooks of water that then go and feed this forest. Okay, so far we've seen that he has covered all the real estate that he built. Okay, he built houses, he planted vineyards, he created gardens and orchards. He planted all sorts of fruit trees in them, and he also created this water canal to then go and water a forest that he was able to walk through, to appreciate, to eat the fruit of. Right, so he's trying to access happiness from a number of different directions in the idea of real estate. Okay, and we mentioned this last week also. I should have mentioned this earlier. His first approach to happiness before anything else is he's going to go from property. He's going to approach happiness through property. So his first step of approaching happiness through property is approaching it through real estate, through physical property that you own, land. Okay, number one is houses, things that you need. He explores things that you need to live, the basic bare necessities of life. He explores things that are extraneous, unnecessary to living, right? He tries accessing happiness through putting a lot of work into it, and he tries taking a step back. Okay, he's experimenting with a number of different takes of how is property going to bring me the most happiness. Is it going to be by providing my basic necessities? Is it going to be by providing me with extra things? Is it going to be with me putting in all my effort? Or is it going to be with me taking a step back and just letting it happen on its own? Where am I going to see the most happiness from my property, from my real estate? Okay, so again, that is verse 4, 5, and 6, Daled, Hey, and Vav of the second chapter here, where he says, again, his first attempt to access happiness through property is with real property. Okay, I'll give a minute now if anybody would like to chime in with a question before we move on. Okay, all right, so with that, I will move on to verse number 7. Okay. This is a bit of a longer verse, so we'll take it up piece by piece. We'll break it up piece by piece. Okay. Kaniti avadim ushvachot. I purchased for myself slaves or servants, and male servants and female servants. Okay. Slaves is probably not the right term to use over here. Slave has a negative connotation. These are servants, right? So I bought or I hired for myself servants, both male and female servants. Uvnei vayis hayali. And I also had people who were part of my household, right? Literally children of the house. Okay, that means people who are not, they're typically used to refer to people who are not related, but they're part of your household. Okay, in the same way that servants are not related, but they are part of the running of the house, they also have children of the house. Gam mikne vakar vatzon, also cattle and sheep, or so cattle and livestock. Harbe hayali, lots of it I had, lots of cattle and livestock. Mikol shahayu lefanai b'Yerushalayim, more than anybody previously had in Jerusalem. Okay, more than any other king in the history of Jerusalem, I had much more cattle and livestock and servants and family or members of my household than anybody else in the history of Jerusalem. Okay, interesting point over here, because historically Jerusalem was not that old, from at least not Jewishly that old at that time. His father, King David, was one who settled Jerusalem. So really the only king who reigned in Jerusalem before him was his own father. But that's good enough, really. King David was also a very wealthy man with a lot of business and a lot of property. And so he's saying at the very least, I had more stuff, more people, more servants, more cattle, more livestock than anybody else, including, or at the very least, my father David. Okay, let me read the verse all together once again. Kaniti avadim ushvachot. I have purchased or I have hired for myself servants, both male and female. Uvnei vayis hayali, and I also have lots of members of my household. Gam, also mikne vakar vatzon harbe hayali. I have lots of cattle and livestock. Mikol shahayu lefanai b'Yerushalayim, more than anybody else ever had before me in Jerusalem. Okay, there's a number of things to bring out in the verse over here. As I already mentioned before, the idea of the difference between servants and members of the household is rather obvious. That when you have servants are people who are hired. They don't have to love you. They don't have to make a connection with you or have any personal connection with you at all. You hire them, you pay them, and they reciprocate, right? As opposed to V'nei Bayit, the members of the household, that's a different relationship. That's somebody who's there because you've welcomed them into your home, and they become part of the household. They become like part of the family. Okay, that's that term over there, b'nei, children of the house. So even though they're not actually related, they're like children. They become part of the family. And we actually use this term in modern Hebrew and in conversation. There's a term that you say someone is a ben bayit. He's or a bat bayit. Somebody is a member of the household, even though they're not necessarily related. He says, I not only had people who were hired to serve me and to work with me, but I also had people who were there on their own volition. We created a connection and they became part of my family. Okay. And he also points out that he had lots of livestock. Now, this is something that we have a hard time relating to nowadays, compared with in previous generations. But livestock used to be the number one sign of wealth, right? We find that a lot in the Torah. For example, Jacob and his brother Esau, they have this whole back and forth over who should get the cattle. Jacob tries to give him a large gift of cattle, and Esau rejects it and eventually takes it. And so cattle was the sign of wealth. If you had cattle, that means you also had land. It means you also had people to tend to the cattle. It means that you had even nowadays, if you have got 10,000 head of cattle, that's quite something. So he says, I had all of it. I had people to work my house. I had stuff for them to do. Right? I had all sorts of things, and I did this in a way that I made sure to go above and beyond anything that was ever done previously. So there's two ideas that he brings out with mentioning the past, with mentioning that I'm doing this more than anybody's ever done it before in Jerusalem. Is number one, he is recognizing the previous research that's been done on the topic, so to speak. He's saying that I am aware of how much people have had in the past, right? So I'm going to be able to compare my level of happiness with their level of happiness. Does having all this stuff make me happier? Does it not? Does, that's part of what he's doing, is he's saying, I'm putting in a lot of research. I had more cattle than anybody else. So we're going to be able to compare my level of happiness with theirs. In this case, he's saying with my father, with David. Okay, and also the basic understanding is also that at the very least he's he's doing something that nobody's ever tried before. Okay, which is also another hallmark of scientific research, is trying something that's never been done before and seeing what results. So he's saying no one's ever gone this far. Okay, we always, especially when it comes to happiness, we often think to ourselves, I would be happier if I had more. And he's going to discuss this more in the book, and we're not going to pass a judgment on it yet because we haven't done the research yet. But our initial reaction is, I would be happier if I had more of something, if I had more money, if I had more property, etc. Crypto, whatever it is. If I had more of something, I'd be happier. Okay, so he's saying, I'm trying it. I am going to put in the work, and I'm going to see. This is part of my research. I'm going to try. Does more equal happier? Okay. And again, we're going to see with the book of Kohelet, we're going to think to ourselves right off the bat, of course not. But let's see how he takes it, because he might take us in. Thank you, Jacob. Yes, if I had more cookies, I'd be happier. Yeah, we're going to see that he might take it in directions we're not expecting. Okay, so again, that was verse 7. Let me read the verse one more time. It's a long one, and it's a little convoluted when you translate it into English. So again, kaniti avadim ushvachot, I have hired for myself male and female servants, uvnei vayet hayali, and I also had lots of members of my household. Gam mikneva karvatzon harbe hayali. I also had lots of cattle and livestock. Mikol shahayu lefanai b'Yerushalayim, more than anybody else had before in Jerusalem. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit here. Bring this up to the center of the page. Okay, verse number 8. Okay. So far he's said external things, right? People, cattle, real estate, as we mentioned. Now he's going to talk about things that are a little more closer to the person himself. And that's where he starts off here with verse number 8. And he says, Kanasti li, I have gathered in for myself. Literally, I've entered for myself, or I've caused it to come in for myself. So as we would say in English, I gathered for myself. Gam kesef v'zahav, also silver and gold. Uskulat melachim, and literally this means the treasures of kings. V'hamidinot, and of the countries. Okay, the treasures of kings and countries. Asiti li sharim v'sharot, I have made for myself all different types of musical instruments. V'tanugot b'nei ha'adam, and all joyous things of people. And this is an interesting one for us. Shida v'shidot, and different types of cabinets, which is kind of a strange thing for us to say, but when you realize it's chests, treasure chests, okay? boxes, and literally it means a cabinet or a box of some sort, but that's just because that's the word that we're going. The word really it's treasure chests, or and it is an interesting thing here that with both musical instruments and treasure chests, he's got a male and a female version of the word. I have not found anyone who clearly states why or what's the difference between a male and female treasure chest or a male and female musical instrument. There are some who say that sharim v'sharot, over here, where my mouse cursor is right now, is not referring to instruments, but it's referring to singers. So sharim would be male singers and sharot would be female singers. It's not really how you would typically say it in Hebrew, but that is an explanation. It also gets a little more difficult because for someone on the level of King Solomon to listen to female singers is not so simple. Was it for himself? Was it for his family members? That's going to be that's a discussion that shows up in the commentaries. But suffice it to say over here that he is stating that he brought in a lot of wealth. Okay, not just real estate, not just people and cattle, but actual things that you and I would consider signs of wealth. So let me read the verse once again from the top. Kanasti li, I have gathered for myself, gam kesef zav, also silver and gold, uskulat melachim, uvahamedinot, and the treasures of kings and countries. Asiti li sharim v'sharot, I have made for myself different types of musical instruments, v'ta'anugot b'nei ha'adam, and the joyous things of people, shida v'shidot, and all sorts of treasure chests or storage areas or places to keep everything. I wasn't, another way to look at it is I didn't have it all just kind of thrown over my house and getting in the way and falling over it. I had it all organized, all orderly. It means he must have had somebody hired to keep it in order. It's not just, we would think, we can potentially think that somebody's house is full of gold and silver and everything, it might be difficult to live there. He says, no, I had it all organized, all put away in the right place. It wasn't in my way. I was able to just enjoy it. Okay. This phrase over here, the treasures of kings and countries, a lot of the commentaries understand that that's referring to diamonds and jewels and pearls and those is that why not just say I had precious stones? Okay, there are Hebrew words for that. Why does he refer to them as the treasures of kings and countries? And what occurred to me is, and this is actually an idea that's brought out in the a very well-known book from the 11th century, 12th century called Chovot Halavavot, the duties of the heart. It's usually translated into, and he brings this idea that when it comes to physical wealth, particularly with diamonds and things like that, their value is only to people who can value them. So a king or somebody who's already wealthy has value in a diamond. If somebody's scrounging for food, a diamond doesn't do very much. They'd rather a sandwich than a diamond, right? That's not, if the economy doesn't give much value to diamonds, then it doesn't mean much. Okay, well-known thing that nowadays a lot of our diamond prices and precious stones are inflated by the De Beers company. That's a rather well-known nugget of information that they have massive storehouses of diamonds and they only allow a couple to be released at a time. I mean, quite a lot, but only a number to be released at a time so that it doesn't devalue gemstones. So in other words, gemstones would be devalued if we if we gave in to if we released all of them into the public. So they really only have value if you're able to appreciate the value. So that's why he doesn't refer to them just as gemstones. He's kind of giving us its own mini lesson over here. That gemstones are valuable to kings and countries, not so much to average people. Silver and gold is a little different. Silver and gold do have innate or inherent value. Gold has always been a valuable item. Silver has always been valuable. Again, you still can't buy a sandwich with a gold bar. And if you're hungry, it's still going to be an issue for you. But it's a little different economically how it plays out. There's another idea over here that the treasures of countries means that he went ahead and he tried to bring in all the things that are special to their own country, right? So you have something that we don't care for so much here necessarily, but somebody in another country values this item very much. So in order for King Solomon to go ahead and value that thing, he would have to be taught how to appreciate it. So he's even kind of hinting to a whole nother level of education that he gave to himself, of educating himself. Why is this item precious in this country? And so he can actually appreciate it. One simple case off the top of my head is Turkish coffee. Okay, Turkish coffee is, if you know how to drink Turkish coffee and know the proper way to make it and appreciate it, then you'll really appreciate it. If you're just an average Starbucks drinker or a Keurig drinker, you might not know what to do with it and you might not appreciate it. So in order for something to be skulat midinot, right, the treasure of a country, you have to educate yourself about it. So he did that. That's part of what he's saying over here, is that not only did he bring these things into his living room and drop them on the floor, but he arranged them, he educated himself about them, he did all the work to figure out what to do with them. Another interesting thing is over here, after everything is gathered in, he doesn't stop there, he does something with the items. Anything he's able to work with, he turns into something. So he turns things into musical instruments to enjoy. And again, organizes everything. And then there's this catch-all phrase, tanugot b'nei adam, the joys of people. That means just everything. What if I didn't cover something with gold, silver, treasures, treasure chests full of stuff, song, dance, if I didn't cover anything, everything else was covered. I got to everything. All tanugot b'nei adam, all things that give pleasure to people. Okay? So again, he's stating over here that he's covered at this point all his bases. If I'm going to go and I'm going to delve into and totally immerse myself into the joys of this world to research them, I've done everything. I've gone to I've covered my bare necessities. I've gone to things that are totally extraneous and unnecessary. I've put in work. I've taken a step back. I've gone to real estate. I've gone to having people serve me. I've had personal connections with people. I have gathered in gold and silver and diamonds. I've done everything you could think of to run after the pleasures of this world. Okay, so I've done all of it. And with that, he kind of ends this piece with saying, with verse number tes over here, verse number 9. And he kind of catches it all with saying, Vigadalti, I have increased, or I've done a lot, Vahosafti, and I have even added, Mikol Shahaya Lefanai B'Yerushalayim, but more than anybody else before me in Jerusalem. However, with all this, with all that I've done, Af Chachmati Amdali, I made sure that my wisdom was with me always. Okay, I didn't just get into it and go with it. I questioned everything I did. Okay, and I researched it, and the whole time I was with my eye on the prize, so to speak, of figuring out what value do these things have to my life? Have they increased the value of my life or decreased it? Okay, and has it helped me in the service of God? Has it helped me in making myself a better person? That's his wisdom stands with him the entire time. So to read this again, Vigadalti, I've done a lot. V'hosafti mikol shayala fanai b'Yerushalayim, I've added on to more than anybody else has ever done in Jerusalem. Af chachmati amdali, however, the whole time, my wisdom stood with me the entire time. So again, looking at this is kind of the method section of the research. He's saying, these are all the things I've done, right? So every direction you could think of and every joy you could think of, I've covered it all, okay? So now again, I'm qualified to now research, to now show you my findings because I've done, maybe you should do this, maybe, right? So you're saying, I've done all of it. Everything that you could think to gain through the joys and pleasures of this world, I've done it all. Okay. One kind of last point that I wanted to show, just an interesting thing that kind of shows itself through the Hebrew language over here, is that when he was talking about real estate, he kept on using this term asiti, I made for myself, because with property, with physical property, you're able to do things with it, right? You're able to build a house on your land. You're able to dig a field and plant a vineyard and all those sorts of things. You can't do that with people, with cattle, with gold, with silver. Those are things that they are special in and of themselves. You can't credit yourself with them. So you may have hired the servants and bought the cattle, but you can't claim the credit for it in the same way. You can't say, I made this cattle. It's cattle. You can't say you made it until it gets back to over here where he makes the musical instruments. There, the term shows up again, that I made for myself musical instruments, where he's then taken something. Just an interesting quirk of the Hebrew language, which again is that he only uses this term asiti when he physically does something to improve an item, as opposed to other places where it's kaniti, I hired, or kanasti, I gathered in. So that's just again, with our focus being on making sure we use the proper translations to the words, that's something that shows up. The Hebrew language he's being very careful with the terms he uses for each one of these things. Okay, so that is all for this week. We went through again chapter 2, verse 4 through 9, Daled through Tet. That's the most we've done in 1 week. All right, six verses in 1 week. And again, this is his method that he goes about to research happiness, and he's going to take this now and research and show us what his findings are.